What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Now, I make a lot of videos about how much I love the Canon R6, and I do, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the bad things that come along with using the Canon R6 today. So the first thing I want to talk about is the overheating. The Canon R6 does overheat. You get the 30 minutes that Canon says that you will when you're recording 4K 60 frames per second, but once you hit that overheating limit, you're going to have over an hour before you're going to get that full 30 minutes of recording time back. So that's something that's really important that people understand, is that not only does it overheat in those 30 minutes that Canon says, but that you have a significant amount of time that it's going to take for the camera to cool off so you can get that full 30-minute recording time back. Another thing that's really unfortunate is the fact that when you choose to shoot high frame rate, 120 frames per second, which you can only shoot in 1080p resolution, which is fine, we knew that going in, but the problem with the footage is the fact that it's actually noticeably softer than even shooting 1080p 60 frames or 1080p 24 frames a second. Unfortunately, that high frame rate footage, even though it is really nice and it's still usable, it's definitely noticeably softer for some reason. The next thing that I want to mention is the fact that with the IBIS that's included in the Canon R6, you get IBIS wobble if you happen to use ultra wide angle lenses. Anything that's wider than 24mm tends to present IBIS wobble when you start moving around. When I got the RF 16mm f2.8 lens, I realized that the IBIS wobble is actually really bad. I wanted to use it as a vlog lens, and unfortunately I end up vlogging with my RP instead of my R6 because the IBIS wobble is so bad. And the digital stabilization actually works better than the physical IBIS stabilization, at least when it comes to kind of walking, talking, vlogging shots. When you record video footage with the Canon R6, you're limited to IPB compression. And unfortunately that means that it's going to be really hard for processors and computers to decode and encode. What that means is when you bring it into one of your editing softwares, you're not going to be able to scrub the footage. It's going to lag, it's going to be really hitchy, and it's going to be really hard to edit. And unfortunately, there's only a couple of processors out right now that are able to handle the full-on IPB footage from the Canon R6. Now, luckily, there is an IPB Lite that came out with, I think it was version 1.3, but you know, if you buy a Canon R6 and you spend all this money, you want to be able to utilize the best footage that the camera can produce. Now, if you want to be able to do that, you're going to need either a 12th gen Alder Lake processor from Intel, or you're going to need one of the M1 architecture processors from Apple. Those are currently the only processors that support hardware acceleration when it comes to H.265 files, and that's what you're going to need to be able to scrub the footage efficiently inside of your editing softwares. Another unfortunate thing about using the Canon R6 is the fact that there's really prevalent rolling shutter in 4K 24 frames a second. It's not as bad at 60 frames per second, it's not as bad in 1080p resolution. In the footage that you're most likely to use the most often, 24 frames a second, 4K, you're going to get really prevalent rolling shutter. And that means that you're going to have to be really careful when you're panning, because any type of straight lines are going to get that kind of jello wobble effect, and you don't want that, and it's really easy to get that effect with the Canon R6, unfortunately. Another really strange thing that I noticed is the fact that sometimes I choose to shoot in 1080p to try to get over the 4K overheating limit. Unfortunately, I noticed that even with the same settings in 4K or 1080p, I get noticeably more noise at the 1080p resolution than I do at the 4K resolution. Now, this is only true if I'm shooting in C-Log 10-bit files. If I choose to shoot in 8-bit and use one of the internal color profiles, there must be some sort of internal noise reduction going on there, because I don't notice the noise issues at all if I choose to do that. Guys, I don't want you to think I hate the Canon R6. I love the Canon R6. It's my favorite camera that I've ever owned. It does everything that I need for making all of the content for my YouTube channel. Please don't think that I hate the camera or that you shouldn't buy it. I just think that you should be aware of all of these things if you're thinking about purchasing it. Anyway, if you think this video helped you, go below, subscribe, click the notification bell, and I'll see you on my next video.